I've never told anyone the full version of what happened out there. Not my friends, not the investigators, not even the intern who stayed alive because I refused to give up on him. People think survival stories are dramatic, loud, heroic. Ours wasn't. It was quiet, slow, almost polite in the way it tried to kill us. And the worst part? I didn't realize we'd been abandoned until the moment it was too late to pretend otherwise. We were only supposed to be on site for 48 hours. A routine structural inspection on a half-finished industrial station in the northern range, 2 hours past the last paved road, surrounded by cliffs, wind, and the kind of silence that makes your voice sound too loud when you break it. My intern, Logan, was 19, smart, eager, nervous in a way I recognized from my own first months in the company. I told him this job was mostly paperwork with boots on, walk around, take notes, send the report, go home. I meant it. The drive up the mountain was long enough to drain the battery on 2 phones and half of Logan's optimism. Gravel pinged against the truck. Dust rolled behind us like smoke, and by the time we reached the ridge, the forest looked less like scenery and more like something that had swallowed better, men whole. The site sat alone in a bare clearing, temporary office, generator shed, storage containers, and the steel frame of a station that was supposed to be finished in 6 months. It already looked tired, like it regretted being built. "Where is everyone?" Logan asked as we stepped out. Good question. There should have been 3 workers maintaining the place, at least 1 supervisor. Instead, empty gravel pad, locked storage, no fresh tire tracks. I tried the radio, static. Then I tried the company line, no signal. Then I tried not to swear, failed. "Maybe they're on break?" Logan suggested. "Yeah," I said, scanning the quiet. "A really long one." Still, it was early. I didn't want him spooked before we even started. I told him to set his gear in the office while I checked the generator. He nodded and jogged off, trying to look confident, tripping on a loose plank in the process. I smiled despite myself. Kid reminded me of me. The generator was running, but weak, like someone had kicked it back to life and hoped we wouldn't notice. I tightened a clamp, restarted the cycle, listened to the rumble settle. It still didn't sound right. I made a mental note to file it later. Inside the office, the air smelled like dust and leftover coffee. Papers were scattered on the desk, not messy, rushed, as if someone had packed in a hurry and decided halfway through that nothing was worth taking. Logan found a logbook by the window. "Last entry was 4 days ago," he said. "No notes about leaving." I took it from him. The handwriting got shakier with every page, and the last line didn't list data. It listed a warning. Stiffness in support joints, C2 Sig4. Should be replaced immediately. This wasn't minor. This wasn't, "We'll fix it next week." This was shut down the site serious. Logan looked at me. "Is that bad?" "It's not great," I said. I didn't add the rest. We walked the perimeter. The frame groaned quietly each time the wind shifted. Metal complaining, not failing, but close enough to make the hairs on my arms stand. Bolts were misaligned. Plates weren't sealed. It looked like someone had been rushing toward a deadline no one could realistically meet. By noon, we still hadn't seen another soul. Still no signal. Still static on the radio. "Should we call HQ again?" Logan asked. "Trying," I said, though we both knew it was pointless. We ate a quiet lunch in the shade of the truck. He talked about his engineering classes, about how this was his first time on a remote site, about how his girlfriend didn't like that he'd be offline for 2 days. Normal things. The sound of normal things kept the silence from swallowing us whole. At around 3, I tried the radio again and finally caught a voice. A fragment. A warped echo. Background. Stay put. Return. Soon. Not enough words to make sense. Too many gaps to trust. I repeated our call sign 3 times. No answer. Something sank in my chest then, slow and heavy. A feeling I'd had once before on a job that went wrong. The moment you realize the people above you aren't paying attention, and maybe haven't been for a while. Still, I told Logan, they'll get back to us. Let's finish the walkthrough. What else could I say? That I had a bad feeling, that something about the silence felt intentional. We circled the site again. The wind picked up. The beams creaked louder. Gravel skittered across the ground like it was trying to run away. Logan kept glancing at the tree line. I kept pretending not to notice. Around sunset, the temperature dropped fast. We fired up the heater in the office and set our bags down for the night. I checked the radio again. Nothing. I checked the truck's GPS. Dead. I checked the emergency phone. No response signal. One by one, the lifelines disappeared. Logan tried to stay calm, but his voice cracked when he said, "They know we're here. They have to." "Yeah," I said quietly. "They have to." Outside, the wind slammed something metal against something hollow. Once, then again, slower, like something giving up. I walked out with a flashlight, scanning the frame. No brakes, no collapse, just the wind pushing pieces around, just the mountains settling in for the night. But when I turned back to the office, something on the ground near the storage container caught the beam of my light. Tracks. Fresh. Not boot prints, tire tracks. Logan hadn't noticed. He was still inside sorting gear. I crouched, touched the dirt. Cold, pressed, new. Someone else had been here today. Someone who left, and they left without saying a word. I straightened slowly, the cold cutting deeper than the wind now. Not fear, realization. A quiet, heavy understanding settling into place. We weren't alone because they forgot us. We were alone because they decided to leave us here. The tracks were the first thing that made me angry instead of just uneasy. Up until then, I'd been doing what our company trained us to do. Assume confusion, not malice. Probably miscommunication. Probably scheduling. Probably someone forgot to log their departure. We were taught to pad the benefit of the doubt, like bubble wrap, around people who signed our checks. But those tire tracks curved in from the tree line, looped around the site, and cut back out, without stopping, at the office. No footprints to the door, no knock on the window. Whoever it was had come close enough to see our truck, the light in the office, the two figures moving behind the glass, and kept driving. Inside, Logan was laying out paperwork, like this was still a normal trip. I brushed the dust off my hands and told myself to wait until morning, when the air was warmer and my thoughts less sharp. Morning didn't help. The generator coughed itself awake in the gray light, flickering the bulbs like a bad horror movie effect. My watch said 7:03. My phone said no service. The radio said nothing at all for a full minute, before spitting back a smear of static and half a word. Hold. Copy. Stay. Operations, this is Ridge Site. Field Lead Carter with Intern Logan. Confirm pickup schedule. Over. I kept my voice calm. You can hear panic through static. Nothing. Then finally, a reply. Ridge Site, this is dispatch. Copy presence on site. Hold position. Await further instructions. Understood, I said. We were told transport would be back down last night. No crew present. Logbook shows incomplete structural work and flag joints on C2 through C4. We need status and timeline. There was a long pause. Too long. Somebody had muted a headset to discuss what the story was supposed to be. Ridge Site, we're reviewing weather windows tightening. Stay put for now. Do not access elevated sections of the frame. Repeat. Do not climb. Company vehicle is your shelter of last resort. Conserve fuel. Will advise. That was it. No time. No tomorrow. Just stay put, like we were boxes in a warehouse. I lowered the radio slowly. Logan watched my face. So, they're coming? He asked it. They're reviewing, I said. It wasn't an answer, and we both heard that. But that was just the beginning. We spent the morning on ground-level checks. I had him photograph every plate, every flange, every anchoring bolt with timestamps while I measured deflection on the lower braces. His hand shook a little at first, Then he got quiet and methodical in that way some nervous people do when you give them a task. "Why would they leave the joints like this?" he asked at one point, squinting at a tiny gap where steel should have met steel. "This passed the last inspection, because passing and being safe stopped being the same thing when the schedule slipped," I said before I could soften it. "Take the photo." By noon, the wind had picked up again, harder this time. It whistled through the hollow frame and carried the metallic groan straight down our spines. Somewhere in the upper section, a brace pinged, a sharp, ugly sound like someone snapping a ruler against a desk. Logan flinched. "That normal?" "Normal for badly stressed steel," I said. "Get back." We retreated to the office, and I spread the logbooks out on the table. Old entries first, from months ago, boring, routine, full of numbers that meant everything is still standing. Then slowly, the tone shifted. The last engineer to be assigned out here had neat handwriting that turned into cramped scribbles, additions in the margins, underlined measurements. "Look at the dates," I said. 3 weeks ago, minor torsion on C2, monitor weekly. 2 weeks ago, torsion increased, recommend partial unload. 10 days ago, load shift suspected. Request temporary halt and reinforcement. 4 days ago, joints C2, C4 stiffening, audible noise under wind load, immediate replacement required. No signatures from anyone above him acknowledging it. No follow-up orders, just his notes, getting more urgent as the days went on. "He saw it coming," I said quietly. "Why didn't they fix it?" Logan asked. "Because fixing it would mean renting equipment, pushing back deadlines, telling the client their grand opening had to wait, and eating the cost. Because somewhere in a conference room, a spreadsheet won an argument against the guy who wrote these notes." "I don't know," I lied. We tried the radio again after lunch. Same game. "Dispatch, this is Ridge Site. Requesting ETA and weather advisories. Over." Static, a click, then a clipped voice. A different one this time. "Ridge Site, conditions are unstable. Transport temporarily suspended. Maintain position. Do not approach structure in high winds. We're coordinating with safety." "Can you patch safety through?" I asked. "We've got log entries about compromised joints that never got addressed." Another pause. Another mute. "Ridge Site, info received. Safety is aware. Hold all questions until debrief." "Debrief?" I repeated. "We're still in the middle of the brief?" The line went dead. Not even static, just that flat emptiness when someone has physically cut the channel. Logan stared at the radio, then at me. "They just hung up." "They disconnected," I corrected. It sounded more neutral than hung up. It felt worse. Irritation started to bloom under my ribs like a slow bruise. This wasn't some chaotic disaster with everyone scrambling. This was controlled, deliberate, sanitized. "Hold position. Await further instructions. Do not approach." They had all the right safety words and none of the actions. We rationed without calling it that. Smaller portions, fewer trips outside, fuel checks every hour. I walked the perimeter again in the late afternoon, counting steps, angles, distances, rehearsing in my head how fast we could get clear if something up there finally let go. The mountains around us swallowed the sound of my boots. No birds, no planes, just wind and steel and the hollow thud of my own heart. Back in the office, Logan was scrolling through his photos. He stopped at the picture of the last log entry. "What happens if those joints fail?" he asked. "Worst case, partial collapse." I kept my voice in that middle register between casual and honest. Not the whole thing, but enough. Enough for what? Enough that you don't want to be under it. He went quiet for a long time after that. I watched his shoulders draw in like he was trying to take up less space in the room. Just before sunset, the radio crackled again on its own. No one had touched it. The volume knob hadn't moved. "They're still up there?" "No," legal said. "Any recall now is an admission. It's remote enough. Just lock it down and we'll—" "Hot mic, hot mic." Then silence. Someone had realized the wrong channel was open. Logan looked at me, eyes wide. "Did you hear—" I heard enough, I said. That was the first moment the shape of it really came into focus. This wasn't bad coordination. It wasn't incompetence. It was a decision. Someone had decided that bringing us back right now was more dangerous, to them, than leaving us in a valley with a failing frame and a storm moving in. I didn't feel scared then. I felt something tighter, sharper, cleaner. All right, I said, standing. We stopped waiting. For what? Logan asked. For them, I said. We spent the next hour moving everything that wasn't bolted down into the office. Extra water, first aid kits, tool chests we could stack against the inner wall, tarps, blankets, fuel canisters. I made Logan walk me through where every piece of safety equipment was, like an oral exam. How many emergency flares? 6, but 2 are expired. Where? Tool locker, top shelf. When do you use them? He hesitated, then answered, Only if we see someone who can actually help. Good, I said. You're learning. It was a small thing, but I watched some of the panic drain out of his face as he focused on tasks instead of what-ifs. That was our first tiny win, our first little island of control in a situation we didn't choose. It didn't make anything safer physically, but it made the room feel less like a waiting room for a verdict. That night, the wind got worse. The office walls rattled. The frame outside sang an ugly, bending song above us that set my teeth on edge. Somewhere high up, steel knocked against steel in a rhythm I didn't like. Logan lay on the cot we'd dragged away from the window, staring at the ceiling. They can't just leave us here, he said. That has to be illegal. It is, I said. Or it will be, once it's on paper with signatures. So they'll fix it, right? They'll send someone tomorrow. I thought about the hot mic conversation. Legal. Admission. Remote enough. Tomorrow, I said, because he needed one more day of belief before I took it away. Get some sleep. We're going to be busy. Doing what? He asked. 2 things, I said. Staying alive, and making sure that if we don't, they won't be able to pretend they didn't know why. He didn't answer. At some point his breathing slowed. Steady. Shallow. I sat in the chair by the window with the logbooks open in front of me and a pen in my hand. On a fresh page under the last frantic entry from the engineer who'd tried to warn them, I wrote the date, the time, and every word I could remember from that accidentally opened channel. Then I signed my name, my employee ID, and added one more line. Site left unattended. Instructions unclear. Evidence of conscious neglect. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was just a record. Outside, the mountain exhaled, and the frame groaned back at it. The storm didn't arrive all at once. It crept in inch by inch, like something trying to make sure we noticed it before it took a real swing. The wind came first, shoving the frame so hard the beams groaned like an animal in pain. Then came the cold. Then the sound. That low metallic thump that didn't match the wind's rhythm. Too heavy, too slow. Around midnight the generator flickered twice and died. Logan sat up so fast he hit his head on the wall. That's bad, right? It's not ideal, I said, already pulling on my boots. Stay inside. If anything happens, you get under the desk. I took the flashlight and stepped outside just as the rain started. Cold, sharp drops that felt like metal taps on my skin. The beam cut through the dark and caught the frame above us, swaying, shifting, complaining with each gust. I scanned the base. Nothing broken, but movement in the wrong place at the wrong time can kill as cleanly as a collapse. A crack echoed from above. Not thunder. Steel. Not tonight, I muttered under my breath. I forced the generator panel open and went to work. Reset. Check the intake. Reprime the line. My fingers hurt from the cold as I clamped a loose hose and pulled a wrench from my belt. It wasn't cooperating, but neither was I. We needed light, heat, anything. Behind me, through the wind, I heard Logan shout, "Something's moving!" I turned and saw it. A piece of the C3 joint plate, maybe the size of my forearm, had sheared halfway loose and was hanging by a single bolt. Every gust made it swing out like a pendulum and smash back against the beam. The sound traveled through the valley like a warning bell. "We're leaving the office," I said when I got back inside. "Grab the med kit and your pack." "But the structure, that's why we're leaving." We moved fast. The storm had eaten half the visibility by then, turning the sight into a blur of silver and shadow. I led him to the far container, the only thing solid enough to outlast a bad night. We shoved supplies inside, braced the door with a tool chest, and waited while the wind screamed around us. For one long minute, nothing happened. Then everything did. A shriek tore through the air, the sound of metal giving up, bolts snapping, gravity claiming its debt. I grabbed Logan by the back of his jacket and shoved him to the ground, just as a chunk of bracing crashed down where we'd stood seconds earlier. Dust blew under the door, vibrating through the floor plates. The whole site shuddered like it was inhaling. "Is it collapsing?" Logan whispered. "No," I said, "but it's thinking about it." We stayed low, listening to the chaos outside. Rain hammered the roof. Steel slammed against steel. The wind pushed the frame like it was trying to tear it down piece by piece. Every crash made Logan jump, and then, just as suddenly, silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. I waited, counted 10 slow breaths, opened the door an inch. The main support on the western side had folded inward, not fully collapsed, but twisted like a crushed elbow. One bad hit away from bringing the upper section down. If we'd been in the office, or the truck, or anywhere else, the night would have ended differently. "We need to move," I said, "before the wind changes direction." We sprinted through the open gravel, slipping, stumbling, half blinded by the rain. The flashlight caught a scatter of fallen bolts, bent plates, and one long streak where something heavy had slid across the ground. I didn't look up. I didn't want to know what was hanging loose above us now. The office door was half off its hinges. The roof had bowed. The inside was a mess. Our notes scattered, the cot flipped, the wall dented from something hitting it hard. Logan's breath came fast. "We can't stay here." "We won't." I grabbed our bags, the logbooks, the emergency flares. He grabbed the food and the water. We moved like we'd rehearsed for weeks instead of hours. By the time we got back to the container, Logan was limping. "What happened?" I hit my leg on the doorframe when we ran." I knelt and pulled his pant leg up. The swelling was already there, angry and tight. His knee was red, hot, and starting to bruise in a way I didn't like. "Can you bend it?" He tried. His breath hitched. "Not much." We didn't have the luxury of not much. "Sit," I said. "Foot forward." I dug out the cold packs, compression wrap, and splint. He clenched his jaw as I worked, his hands gripping the sides of the crate so hard his knuckles went white. "You're going to be okay," I told him. "Am I? Because it doesn't feel—" "You're going to be okay," I repeated. That was our small victory that night. His breathing slowed. The pain pulled back. The panic loosened its grip. A tiny island of control inside a storm that didn't care. When he finally slept, exhausted, I opened the logbooks again. The rain softened outside, but the frame still clicked and shifted. A dying animal trying to stand one more time. I went through every page, every note, every missed warning, and then I found something I shouldn't have. An email printed and shoved between the logs, dated 5 days before we arrived. Per legal, no new site visits, chain of custody risk. Temporary abandonment recommended until structural liability contained. Below it, initials from 3 executives. They had known, they had warned each other, and they had sent us anyway, not by mistake, by design. I felt something in me settle, not like relief, like gravity finding a new point to pull toward. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I folded the email, sealed it inside a plastic sleeve, and placed it at the bottom of my pack. If I didn't make it out, someone would. Someone would find this. And if I did make it out, someone would pay for it. Around dawn, the storm quieted. The wind softened. For the first time in hours, I could hear my own breathing instead of the mountain trying to tear itself apart. I stepped outside into the wet silence, the sky gray and low. The frame stood crooked now, wounded, leaning in a way no structure ever should. Logan stirred behind me, voice hoarse. Are we getting out today?" I looked at the broken steel, the crushed earth, the valley breathing fog like smoke. "Yes," I said, "one way or another." Because after last night, there was no scenario, none, where I let the people who left us for dead write the ending. The morning after the storm didn't feel like morning at all. The clouds hung low, the light was thin, and the whole valley looked washed out, as if someone had drained the color to make room for whatever came next. Logan was propped against the crate wall, pale but awake, his knees strapped tight. He watched me pack the last of our gear without asking questions this time. "Do you think the road's still passable?" he asked. "It doesn't matter," I said. "We're not waiting for them anymore." We couldn't climb the ridge, not with his leg. Couldn't hike the valley, flooded, no visibility, unstable ground. So we did the only thing that made sense. Moved everything to the truck and prepared to wait for a window, not for rescue, for movement. While I loaded the last can of water, Logan pointed to something on the far side of the clearing. At first I thought he was seeing things. Shock can do that. But then the shape resolved through the fog. A vehicle. Not ours. Not the company's. A dusty white pickup crept down the path from the trees. Slow, controlled, tires hugging the muddy ground, like the driver didn't want to leave any more tracks than necessary. For a second I tensed, thinking it was someone sent to finish the cover-up. But when the truck door opened and a broad, familiar figure stepped out, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was Reyes, a senior technician, the only guy at HQ who'd ever treated the field team like humans instead of line items. He walked toward us carrying a thermal blanket under one arm, a toolbox under the other, and an expression like he'd aged 5 years in one night. "Jesus, Carter," he muttered, "you're alive." "Not for lack of their trying," I said. His jaw tightened. I didn't follow the order. Figures. He never did. He looked at Logan, at the collapsed structure, at the office with its roof caved in on one side. His face went still. "They signed off on the abandonment," he said. It wasn't a question. "Didn't they?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He picked up my pack, heavier now because of the documents inside. "Get in the truck. Both of you. Now." As we rolled down the mountain road, the frame disappeared behind the trees, and for the first time in 2 days, the valley felt less like a trap. Logan leaned his head back, relief washing over him so fast he almost fell asleep sitting up. "You knew," I said to Reyes quietly, "before you came." "I saw the memo," he replied. "Saw the timestamps. Saw who signed. Nobody was supposed to be up there. They were going to seal the site after the storm and pretend the whole place was unsafe to enter. That was the plan?" "That was the plan," he said. The farther we drove from the site, the clearer his voice became, as if distance drained some of the poison. When we reached the service road, my phone suddenly lit up with notifications, searching for a connection like a drowning man, searching for air. No signal yet, but it was coming. Reyes glanced at the device, buzzing faintly in my hand, and said, "There's going to be a firefight in that office building come morning. They're already scrambling." "How do you know?" "Because I told them I was going up there," he said, and the silence on the call told me everything else. We reached the ranger station by mid-afternoon. From there, everything happened fast. Paramedics, heat blankets, soft voices telling Logan to breathe slowly, a sheriff taking our statements, Reyes standing behind me like a silent anchor in a storm that still hadn't fully passed. When my phone finally connected to the network, messages poured in, unanswered calls, urgent texts from management, and one email marked critical immediate response required. I didn't open any of them, not then, not ever, as far as they were concerned. 2 days later, investigators arrived at my house with printouts of internal emails, copies of risk assessments that had been buried, and questions that made it painfully clear just how close we had come to being erased by paperwork. The engineer who'd written the final log entries had already been dismissed months earlier, his warnings ignored, filed away, stamped, reviewed by someone who probably didn't even open the document. The executives who signed the abandonment memo tried to soften the language when questioned. Temporary pause, operational misalignment, unexpected weather conditions. They spoke like PR statements wearing cheap suits, but none of their words mattered once the investigators read my written account and compared it to the hot mic recording Reyes had captured after hearing a strange click on the shared channel. It wasn't much. A few seconds of internal discussion, muffled, annoyed. Legal says let it sit. Liability spikes if we intervene. Remote enough. Short. Damning. The fallout wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Careers don't explode. They unravel. Quietly, then completely. 3 executives resigned for personal reasons. 2 managers were suspended pending legal review. 1 director was fired outright. The company released a statement full of words that said nothing and revealed everything, and we hadn't even gone public yet. Logan recovered, slowly. The swelling faded, the limp eased, and he eventually returned to his classes with a story he told only to people who listened with their full soul. I helped him get an internship with a firm that actually cared whether interns survived their assignments. Reyes stayed with the company long enough to testify. Then he walked out the door, turned in his badge, and never looked back. As for me, I didn't go back either. Not to that office, not to that mountain, not to the version of myself that thought loyalty meant silence. I started consulting with agencies that investigate industrial negligence. Less money, more sleep, better life. People who call me now don't panic when I ask for documentation. They send it. Sometimes I think about the moment I found that printed email shoved between the logbooks. How small it looked, how heavy it became, how close it came to being buried under steel and dirt. One evening, months after everything settled, I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sun drift behind the trees. The world looked quiet in the way the mountain never did, peaceful without asking anything in return. Logan texted me a photo, a new badge, his first day at his new internship. "Made it," he wrote. "You earned it," I replied. The sky darkened. The porch lights clicked on. My house creaked softly in the settling warmth. And in that moment, I realized something simple. Survival wasn't the victory. Silence afterward was. The kind where nothing is hidden, nothing is covered, nothing is waiting in a valley to crush you because someone needed a cleaner spreadsheet. I leaned back, let the quiet settle deep in my bones, and breathed without looking over my shoulder. They left us for dead, but we didn't die. We lived, and they had to live with that.